Yes, right? It's December 1st. Man, you came to church, we had a present for you at the doors. I got mine early. I opened mine early. I'm one of those guys, right? Sheila and I sat down this morning. We read day 1 for the Advent devotional. What a great way to just put our heart and our mind in the same place. It's amazing that this devotional we found coordinates so well. It talks about Christmas, an Advent devotional. And we're speaking about Christmas. Isn't that amazing? You guys, come on, man. It's Christmas time. We are one church in 2 locations. You saw what Chantel talked about the Framingham campus. I want to thank you all. So far, we're up to 650 kids that we've helped. Framingham has asked if we could go to 1,000. We're going to try to do that by next week. So that means Christmas shopping. If you guys want to go out and buy some more sneakers, we'd love that. We want to just kind of reach 1,000 so we can help meet the need that they've identified. This is so cool. So cool. Thank you so much. You know, you got to understand, I'm one of those guys, I love Christmas. We have negotiated in my household. We put up the Christmas decorations on Veterans Day, all right? We went from a 9-foot artificial tree that we wore out to a 10-foot artificial tree, and you know what that meant? More lights, baby! We're up to 4,400 lights, which is why we use an artificial tree. I've learned from experience that natural trees do not bear that burden very well, as a way of shortening their lifespan. We've been listening to Christmas music. I already bought most of my presents for Christmas. I know I am one of those guys, right? I am not, however, one of these guys. This was up before Halloween, right? The only thing more obnoxious than having that up before Halloween is that they're charging $400 for that mailbox, right? So I may not be one of those guys, but I am one of these guys that really loves Christmas. I just really enjoy it because Christmas is a worldwide celebration. All over the world. On December 25th and 24th, people buy presents, cook food, put out decorations, sing music, gather together with people, all to recognize the birth of a child. What other human being stops the world in all these nations for 24 hours and gets recognition like that, right? What an extraordinary child, heralded by angels with a promised destiny to change the world, who has impacted the world exactly like they predicted. But too often we kind of lose sight of that magnificence of Jesus at Christmas time, don't we? I mean, sometimes I understand that for a lot of people it's a tradition, but also it's kind of symbolic. We put out all these decorations, and we put out this little nativity set. And then what's the very last thing so many people do is they put out little baby Jesus the night before Christmas. It's kind of symbolic about how we enter into Christmas sometimes. We just kind of collapse on Christmas Day from all the energy we've put into it, and then we go, oh yeah, Jesus, happy birthday Jesus, Merry Christmas, and we fall asleep. So what we want to do here at Faith Community Church is we want to bring Jesus back into the center of our focus for this Christmas season. We want to talk about Jesus Christ, who is the light who came to draw people to God, the great shepherd who meets us in our greatest needs to guide us and to protect us. To talk about Jesus Christ, who's come to bring peace into our world. Jesus Christ, who made God tangible and approachable in a way we could never have anticipated. I'm looking forward to this series. My prayer is that no matter what your circumstances are in life, that you'll have this moment of joy. It might even feel like an extravagant moment of joy. Something crystallizes in your mind, or an insight that just explodes on you. And maybe you will have a breathless moment of worship. It's possible that leaving a worship center at one of these services, you might shake your head and think, I just met God. And you will have this feeling on the inside of your heart, I am so glad I came. That's our heart's desire for you this morning. This morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about astronomy. It's a little bit about how you might find some spiritual direction and how you can rock it as a star this Christmas. To do that, I want to start by praying. God, I love being in this place. Even more, I love talking about Jesus. Would you use me this morning, despite all my flaws, to just speak to people in a way that touches their very heart and their very soul into their minds? May there be people, Lord, who wonder, how would he know that? and then come to realize it's because you know that about them. That you love everybody in this room, that you've called everyone to this room to this moment, and that you want to speak to everyone into this room. So use me however you see fit this morning. I step out of the way and I give you the moment. I love you, Father. Amen. Who's traveling this Christmas? Who's going to be somewhere else on December 25 than this area? Who's traveling? Anybody? You're traveling? Where are you going? Where are you going? New Jersey. I'm sorry. All right. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Who else is traveling? Where are you going? Michigan. Okay, not bad. Where else? Anyone else? California, all the way to the West Coast. Anyone leaving the United States for Christmas? No. Anyone leaving the United States? Anyone going to another country for Christmas time? You are? Where are you going? Dominican. You're getting some sunshine, right? Who needs the cold and the snow? All right, I want to talk a bit about some people who traveled at Christmas time. Okay? Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod, and about that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is this newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." Let's talk a little bit about who these wise men are. They are a combination, this is interesting, of astronomers and astrologers. They were people who studied the heavens because they believed that God spoke through what was in the heavens to people about what he was doing on earth. They believed it. And so they studied it. They were quasi-scientists and futurists, trying to figure out what God was up to. And what we know is what we think happened is that there was just an arrangement of, could be constellations, it could be the arrangement of planets. Whatever happened, they had mapped out the stars by nations. And what they saw happen in this quadrant that belonged to Israel was an arrangement of stars or planets that gave them an indication that God was doing something through an exceptional human being who had a divine destiny that was born in the nation of Israel. That's what they figured out by looking at the stars. And so they decided, we got to go see this. This is an extraordinary event. These are foreigners who packed up to travel, we think, close to 1,000 miles. This was not a day when they could take a train, a plane, or an automobile. This was a day when traveling was laborious. They would pack up supplies. They would have to bring money to buy more supplies. The journey would be long. They would take a whole caravan of people for protection and for service to get them to where they needed to be. They would travel on camels into this direction across the deserts, through urban areas, through rural sections, past danger from thieves and brigands on the road. They put a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resource into trying to figure out what God was doing in their world. It was so remarkable to them. So remarkable that God would speak through the stars. God was speaking a language that they could understand in order to reach them and to bring them to meet Jesus Christ. I always think it's remarkable that God would orchestrate the birth of Jesus Christ with an astronomical, a heavenly event, so that these people could understand that something divine was happening and they would pursue Jesus Christ. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I love Christmas, because God speaks to us through unique and extraordinary ways that catch our attention. We hear it, we see it. It's a way that we would respond. I mean, this is what I love about Christmas. You walk around Christmas and we say, "We're Merry Christmas." And the word Christ is on signs all over the world. And even when you see Happy Xmas, you automatically know in your mind, you substitute what's supposed to be where the X is. The name of Jesus Christ rises up in the world all around us. I was walking through a store the other day, and suddenly I stopped because I could hear a Christmas hymn playing over the sound system of a store. In the midst of the chaos, I could hear a moment of serenity. People are talking about virtues like peace and joy and love. They're talking about ways in which they can be generous to people. and compassionate to those who are in need. And there are people who are seeking something divine that just catches their attention and it stops them because God is speaking to us all the time in ways that we can understand. I see it here in the church. I see it when people come from AA and they've come looking for that higher power and they seek out a church. Maybe you had a child recently. It was such a miraculous event that it triggered something inside of you to come to this place. Maybe your children, you thought to yourself, it'd be a great foundation for our kids, give them a little bit of religion. And so you bring your kids downstairs, and what else are you going to do? You come into the room, and suddenly God is speaking to you in a way that you didn't anticipate. Maybe you're here because you've been out hunting, and the serenity of being in nature. Maybe it was the dawn as it came up. Maybe it was a quiet moment that you didn't expect, and there was a stirring inside of your soul that you could understand. So you decided to come here this morning. You might be a scientist who's been studying nature, and you see a complexity and a design to it that you just can't ignore anymore. And so you showed up here at this place this morning because God has been speaking to you in a way personally designed for you. And like the wise men, you made a great decision to walk into this room. But it's never an easy decision. Like the wise men, it costs you something. We sometimes, those of us who go to church often, those of us who are Christians for a long time, we forget how much it costs to walk into this room. The fears that we wrestle with, the fear of rejection, the fear of shame, the fear of the unknown. I don't get what's going on around me. And you have to overcome that just to come into these doors. It's a remarkable thing that you're here this morning, and we're so glad that you're here. I've stood at those two doors. I remember this one time I stood with my wife and I with a woman at that door right there, and she trembled to walk into this room. She started to cry. She said, if you knew the things that I have done in my life, I don't feel like I can walk into that room. And so we just gently coaxed her into this space, telling her how much God loved her and called her to this moment that she could be here to hear what was going to happen. You came seeking God this morning because somehow, some way, God has been speaking to you. And you settled into this place. It was a good decision. So the story continues. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this. He was the king. The last thing he needed to know is there was another king that was born, right? As everyone in Jerusalem. And he called a meeting of the leading priests and the teachers of religious law, and he asked, where is this Messiah supposed to be born? And so they said, in Bethlehem in Judea. For this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come to you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. I mean, where else would you go for the birth of a king but to a palace? And how awkward is it to show up and Herod says, nobody here is pregnant. Right? And people are going, what? What's going on? So they begin to ask some questions. They talk about what they see happen in the heavens. And Herod calls and turns to the people he thinks should give spiritual guidance when you have a big question about God and you don't know what the answer is, to people who study the Bible on a regular basis. They turned to scholars and religious leaders and they said, explain to us where this person's supposed to be born that's written about in the stars. And something really amazing happened. They knew exactly where to find him because they had been waiting centuries for this moment. 700 years before Jesus was born, there was a man named Micah. And to Micah, God gave a promise. It's the promise that they quote and that we see recorded in the very same scriptures that they read. You, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judah. Yet a ruler of Israel, whose origins are in the distant past, will come to you on my behalf. For 700 years, they knew this promise, and it hadn't been fulfilled. When it talks about whose origins are the distant past, you may have heard a phrase like ancient origins. What that referenced was that this child was going to come from a family line that was old and well established. And so they just waited a really long time for God to act. And here's the amazing thing. We read in another passage of the Bible that the government had just decided that they would call a census to count the population. To do that, they required you went back to your ancestors' homeland. This required a young couple to travel from their hometown in Nazareth all the way to Bethlehem in order to be counted for the census. It just so happened that this young woman was pregnant, so that when she arrived in Bethlehem, while the stars were aligned and this promise was in print that this child would be born. Can you understand the coordination of all the events that's taken place at this moment? God actually moved the Roman Empire, for this region of that empire, to call for a census, which forced people to move, for a young woman that just happened to be pregnant, to just happen to go to Bethlehem, to just happen to give birth, while this event in the stars just happened. There's a lot of coincidence going on there. Kind of makes you think that there's a little bit more than happenstance and possibly design. I mean, what an extraordinary story. This is what we mean by the wonder of Jesus. That all these events would align, centered around a child that was born. It's just this evidence that something powerful was happening. Something super, above the natural was taking place. Divine was occurring. Which is what we're slowing down for a moment. God moved human affairs to fulfill a promise centered on a child. So we should probably slow down, because something wonderful is happening, and we should pay attention when that happens. And it always amazes me. Where did they find the exact guidance that they needed at that time in their lives? By turning to people who understood the Bible. It's why we talk about the Bible every single Sunday in this church. It's why we help people gather together in small groups. We call them faith groups, so they get to study the Bible. So we tell people all the time, if you need some guidance, just let us know. We know people who study the Bible can help you, because it's amazing that we always find clarity from the Bible about what God is doing in our lives. It's what the wise men did, and it's what we do still to this day. Let's get back to our story, though. So after this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them, and it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. And they entered the house. They saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. And they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What few words to describe a tremendous amount of energy. That this caravan had traveled 1,000 miles. They went to the capital city because they knew nowhere else to go. They found the government center to get some guidance. They found an ancient promise that was 700 years old, and so they decided to follow it. This is like Indiana Jones meets National Treasure. They go to this little tiny town, and something happens in the heavens that points them to a home, and they get the courage to knock on a door to find a child that was been born at that time. And they knew that it was Jesus Christ. You get the extraordinary nature of all these things that happened. No wonder they are filled with joy, bow down to worship, and just give him these treasures. All that journey led them to this child, Jesus Christ. And their world had been changed. This experience was so profound that they never forgot it. Jesus' mother never forgot it. We wrote about it in our scriptures and preserved it. It's a story that is concrete, nailed down into time, with historical figures, geographical location, marked to a promise, tied to Jesus. And so in 2019, the world stops and worships this wonder that's Jesus. This is what we were praying for you this morning in that lobby at 8:30. All the volunteers gathering together, the staff coming together, and we prayed that this morning you would discover a joy and a wonder that is priceless. There's a deeper layer to this whole story, though, because I talked to you about this promise from this person, Micah. Micah had a contemporary named Isaiah. Isaiah also talked about this great person who was going to come and have a profound impact on the world and would lead people. He talked about him in a number of sections of his writings, but in one area of his writings, he describes this leader as this. He says, "You will be a light to guide the nations." The comment that he's making is that this person that was going to come at this time would have an impact that would be like light shining on darkness that would reach a wide swath. And by this, he means the whole world. That this person that God would send, that Micah said would be born into Bethlehem, was meant to be a light to the world that would drive the whole world back to their Creator. He was to be a guide to people that would lead the world back to the Creator of the world, as knowing that all people of the world are children of God. So God sent Jesus Christ to this world, the whole world, and these wise men are symbols of the initial fulfillment of that promise. Can you imagine that? God spoke to people in another country to move them to Bethlehem, to help fulfill a promise that from the very beginning of his existence, before Jesus could say a word or stand up and walk, he would already start drawing the nations of the world to God. How majestic is this child? How wonderful is this child? And these people from the world, as they discovered Jesus Christ, would worship him. And Jesus knew this about himself. I'm sure that his mom told him these stories, but I think that as Jesus grew and his self-awareness grew and he began to understand who he was and what God had called him to do, this is how he himself would describe his call. Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, "I am the light of the world." Get that? It's tied all the way back to a promise centuries before this. I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you'll have the light that leads to life. What a bold claim. But Jesus understood how his life and destiny had been intimately tied into God. Being fulfilled in this moment, this person, this child, with all that's happening that God is declaring we believe is divine, God himself come to us through Jesus Christ. It's amazing that God would send a light into heaven to draw the wise men to Jesus, who is the light of the world, that would draw all people of the world from every nation to God. It's a little sad that right now in America, I understand that if you come from another nation right now in America, it's a little bit of a difficult time. If you have immigrated to America and you are in America, it's a little hard. You don't necessarily feel as welcome, this great melting pot of the nations. I want you to know that God welcomes you into this house. Do you understand that by being in this room, all these nations represent in this room, worshiping with one voice, one body, we are joining together to fulfill the promise that God gave about Jesus Christ, that he would draw the nations to God. You matter to God, and God loves you, and God has called you, and God invites you to worship him as his child and as his family. What a beautiful moment that we fulfill this promise together in worshiping this child. So have you thought, what's your response this morning? And can you see it? Can you see the wonder of Jesus Christ, the fulfillment of a promise that God made to a nation of people thousands of years ago? A promise that he would be a light to guide the nations of the world to worship. Can you think that this child that was born 2,000 years ago, fast forward, here we are on all the continents of the world, in multiple languages and cultures, all coming together for a 24-hour period of time to recognize his birth. What a marvelous and amazing moment to be in. We are experiencing this fulfillment in a way that Jesus' mother Mary could never have anticipated, which the wise men could not have known. We are living in a moment that shows the grandeur of the birth of Jesus Christ and God's plan for him. The God who directed government affairs, the God who moved people from different corners of the world to come to the birth of Jesus Christ, coordinating at a time with a movement into the heavens to tell the world that he was meant to be a light that would guide them back to their Creator. Are you seeking God this morning? Are you like the wise men who've been following these things that have been going on in your life that you don't fully understand but have been touching you? Are you here this morning hearing some direction or something from the Bible that is stirring the inside of you? Have you discovered that the answer to that pursuit is in Jesus Christ? Some people say, how do I know if I'm on the right track when God is speaking to me? In my experience, it leads you to Jesus Christ. In my experience, clarity comes from the Bible, just like it did for the wise men. And the signs always end up leading to Jesus Christ. And then somehow, somewhere, for some of us, it's the last place you'd ever imagine you'd be. And suddenly you're sitting in a seat in a room like this, and it's like you're hearing somebody speak to you about your life in a way that it's kind of uncanny. But all these signs, all this movement, all this stuff that's been going in your life is suddenly crystallizing into this place at this time. And you have an opportunity to respond. Like the wise men, do you understand what it meant for them to kneel at the cradle of a child to worship him? That of all the words that could have been chosen to describe what they were doing at that moment, that they chose worship to describe the act. They had been led by God, these scholars, these wealthy individuals, to travel this great distance, and then the only natural response was to worship him. Would you surrender your life to Jesus Christ this morning? Would you choose to worship him the way the wise men did? Would you seek to remember a moment and then follow him throughout your life? That's the call at this Christmas. We would love to help you with that moment. All you have to do is come up afterwards and we'll talk you through that. But there's something else here in this for us. For those of us who've chosen to follow Jesus Christ, there's an even deeper layer in this now. Because God had made a statement about the nature of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ was to be a light to the world, to guide the nations. And Jesus Christ understood it himself. He called himself the light of the world. But then Jesus turned to his followers, the people who would follow him, and he said, you are the light of the world. Do you understand what he's saying? God made this promise about me, and now I'm expecting you to participate in this promise, and you get to be a light to the world like a star in the heavens. You get to point people to Jesus Christ. Like the scholars who opened the Bible to guide people to Jesus Christ. You get to be that. How profound is your life? How significant are you? That God calling you to this moment reminds you, you are the light of the world. To a world in darkness. And doesn't the world feel dark sometimes? War, violence, political chaos, the insignificance we feel. In the midst of all of this, God looks at you. Jesus Christ looks at you and says, you can be a light to the world, guiding them back to their Creator through Jesus Christ. So we have another gift for you. The ushers are going to come out, and we're going to pass out a gift for you. It's going to take a few minutes to get to everybody. We gave you a gift for you to use every day of Christmas. You get to open it, you get to read it, and God will speak to you on a daily basis. Trust me, if you take that book that we gave you and you walk in and you just read it every single day, you're going to have these divine moments where you're going to feel an uncanny sense that God is speaking directly to you. It will happen over the course of this upcoming month. So read it. If you miss a day, so what? Pick it up and keep reading it. But this is for you. Go ahead, start passing it out. This is for you to give away. What I love about Christmas is that people are primed for it. And it's an easy opportunity for me to talk about Jesus Christ. It's an easy opportunity for me to invite people to come to church. You know, so the other day, we had one of those moments where we lost all water in our house, and so we called some people to come, and this wonderful guy came with his son. They dropped everything to come and service our well. In the midst of the conversation, because I like to chat with him for a little bit, we're just talking about life and all, and he looks at me, and he says one of those moments, he goes, "You're a pastor, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You said you had a wife and kids." And I said, "Protestant pastor." And he goes, "Oh, makes sense." All right. And so we got to chat because he was a little confused about the whole thing. He's like, which church you go to? And I'm like, oh, we're at the on 135 right on the edge of Ashland with a big white church, Faith Community Church. He goes, cool. And then I just looked at him and said, you know what? You know, if you're looking for something to do on Christmas Eve, we really do Christmas Eve well. I'm like, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, we gather together. The room will be filled with people and kids. I'm telling you, if you come, you'll be glad that you're there. And you know what he did? Said, oh, okay. He didn't think I was a freak. He didn't look at me like I had two heads. He didn't get up and walk out of the house. He just looked at me and he said, thanks. And we continued on with the conversation. There's no fear in inviting someone to Christmas Eve. It's Christmas time. You get to be the light of the world. You get to be the light of the world. You can be the light of the world. You can direct people to God through Jesus Christ by simply saying, you should come to Christmas Eve. My church does it really well. We have 4 services. We do it the 23rd and the 24th. We have great opportunity for families out across the hall. If the kids are getting a little antsy in here, the kids love it in here. And I'm telling you, we are bringing Jesus Christ front and center. And wouldn't it be awesome as you're walking out to a quiet, tender moment of silent night that your friend looks at you and they actually say, thank you for inviting me. That was amazing. So all I'm asking you to do is you take these cards and just pray. You read your devotional and you just pray and say, God, what do you want me to do with these cards? Who do you want me to invite? I mean, all the star had to do was be in the heavens. And all the scholars had to do is respond to the question. And just say, God, make me attentive to the moment when I could give someone a card and just invite them that they might discover the wonder of Jesus Christ at Christmas. Because I'm telling you something, my motivation in life is that everybody could see the wonder of Jesus Christ. And wouldn't it be amazing if this Christmas 2,500 people all discover the wonder of Jesus Christ? That'd be cool, wouldn't it? God, I want to take this moment. I want to pray with the cards as they're being distributed into the hearts of people that you might be speaking to this morning. God, I pray you draw them to Jesus Christ and they may discover the wonder of what you've done through Jesus Christ for the whole world, for every nation. God, over these cards that we are distributing, may you just give us all, each of us, God, in this room, opportunities to just invite people to discover that wonder of Christ, that they might meet Jesus Christ, and in meeting Christ, meet God. I love you, Father, and I trust you. This is your moment.